Hello, this is Stan Allen, kind of subbing in for Brittany Wright today. We're excited to have a great panel. We're here to talk about all the aftermath of what happened last week. But first off, we would like to thank the African American Leadership Forum sponsors, the Minneapolis Foundation, NorthPoint Health and Wellness, and Children's Minnesota for making this town hall possible. We also thank our partners, which include NorthPoint and Children's Minnesota, Insight News, Minnesota Spokesman-Recorder, and Minnesota Community Care. Today, we have so much to talk about, and if you're watching the news, we don't even know, we might have to update this real time. But our town hall, we're gonna focus a little bit on Georgia. We have Georgia on our minds. We're gonna recap the historic election of that state's first Black US Senator and first Jewish Senator. Shortly after the election results came in, we witnessed another kind of travesty, I call it, another day of white supremacy. This time in a violent riot and anarchy and storming our nation's capital. We're going to talk about that. This attack is on our democracy, is the result of a president's refusal to accept defeat, years of complicitness and collusion by right-leaning elected officials, media representatives, and white supremacists. So sounds like we have some deep topics, and we do. Our distinguished panelists will reflect on the triumphs of the 2020 election while expressing their thoughts on the disastrous aftermath in DC. Why did this happen? What can we expect in the future? What actions can Black people take now in anticipation for what's next? Today, just today, the House of Representatives, they're meeting right now, are expected to move forward with articles of impeachment to remove Donald Trump from office. Who knows what's going to happen with that? And his supporters aren't even going down. They're not going to go down without a fight. We know that. The FBI announced plans of armed protest in all 50 states starting this Saturday. So we're going to kind of unpack all this. And we have great people. We have Ron Harris, chairman of the Minnesota Midwestern Caucus for the Democratic National Convention. So we're happy to have Ron back with us. Lissa Jones, host of KMOJ's Urban Agenda and the popular podcast Black Market Reads. Very happy to have Lissa. Anika Bowie, one of our previous panelists, vice president of the Minneapolis NAACP and founder of the civic engagement organization called Run Like Harriet. James Burrows, Vice President and Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer for Children's Minnesota. Happy to have him. And of course, last but not least, Adrienne Thornton. She is our regular mainstay to talk about what's going on with COVID-19, but she's a nurse and infection preventionist with Children's Minnesota. Welcome, panelists, and thank you for being here. We're going to kick off with Ron. Ron, please speak to the historic nature of the runoff in Georgia. That seemed like years ago, right? And what happens now that Georgia has turned blue?
Yeah, well, first, thank you, Stan, for the invitation. Thank you, AALF, for hosting these critical conversations. I found that during this time of our virtual work, these updates are all so important for us here in the community. And to my fellow panelists, so good to see you guys again. I feel like it's been too long since we've all had the opportunity to be in a room together. I miss the opportunities to go to James' parties and all the other things. So it's good to see you guys here on the screen. My name is Ron. I serve as the DNC's Midwestern Caucus Chair. I was elected to that role a couple of years back. And as part of that role, I get the opportunity to travel the country and help out with different races, help with fundraising, give speeches, things like that. And I just had the opportunity to be in Georgia for the month of December and to help off with the runoff races. And the fact that Georgia turned blue, this is the first time since 1992 that Georgia voted blue for president. This is the first time that the state of Georgia ever elected a Black person statewide, and certainly the first time that Georgia's also elected someone Jewish statewide to the U.S. Senate as well. It is incredibly historic. It is historic because the victory would not have been possible without, first and foremost, the leadership and the vision from Stacey Abrams, who ran for governor and was cheated out of that win. So I still call her Governor Abrams. She'll be back on the ballot in 2022. But that vision of believing in the state and believing in not only leadership from community, but Black leadership and brown leadership and women's leadership, and investing in that leadership for years, not only around elections, but in between those elections as well. And I think it's going to serve as a model for us as we go about the country winning these races. Not only did they win those races, but they due to those flips, it put the Senate chamber in Democratic hands, which means that we now have a Democratic president, a democratically controlled Senate, and a democratically controlled House at the federal level. For those who've been paying close to attention to COVID-19 and other things, that's good news for us. That's good news. That means that we have people in charge who are taking this virus seriously. And what warms my heart is that once again, it looks like Black people saved this country. Not only did Black people help save this country with our record voter turnout in the general election, but we helped save this country with record voter turnout in Georgia to help win back those Senate races. And then if you look at the footage from what happened at the Capitol, the terroristic mob insurrection that happened at the Capitol last week, it was a Black man that probably saved elected officials' lives with his heroic efforts. That officer, Eugene, I can't remember his last name, but it feels like there's a theme in this country of Black folks taking leadership, Black folks taking space, Black folks investing so much in a country that up until this point has refused to invest back in us. And so I think when you point to Georgia and you look at the fact that without our leadership and without our votes and without our brilliance, without our organizing, without our relationships, without our dreams, this wouldn't happen. I'm encouraging folks to take up some space in this conversation. I'm encouraging folks to remember that we are a vital part of this country. We are part of its founding. We are part of its building. We are certainly part of its leadership. And it's time for us to ask for something back now. I really think that. And so, again, grateful for this conversation, grateful for the panelists that are here. I'm excited about the opportunity to see how we take leadership up in this moment and how we lead the path towards more prosperity for us in this country.
Thank you, Ron. Great points all the way around. Rumor has it that Anika might have been in Georgia too. So we're going to give her a chance to kind of speak to her work to support the runoffs in Georgia. And, what is it like to be part of this historic grassroots movement?
Well, absolutely. So, my name is Anika Bowie, and I am no stranger to historic moments and historic movements and historic policy change. In Minnesota, we have made history with so many things, positive as well as negative. And when I had just the privilege of having a little bit of some time open in my schedule, and I thought about what I wanted to do and contribute, not only to democracy, but just to our community, our people, right? And me and my partner, Eliza Darris, had decided to go down to Georgia. So we made a 15-hour trip down there and got connected with Color of Change, Stacey Abrams' organization called the New Georgia Project, as well as the Georgia NAACP president who's down there as well. And it was hands on deck, action centered all the way. One of the things I really appreciated about my experience with door knocking in Georgia was the energy and the campaign around just like it was everywhere. It was highly visible. And, in Minnesota and during like the pandemic with 2020, we was having a strong emphasis on essential workers and why they're so important. And one of the campaigns that I saw there was they had a strong emphasis on essential voters, right? And that's one of the things we don't really realize, that literally our democracy is dependent on people who come out and vote, people who show up and vote, and people who select representatives who are voting in our best interests. And not only were we able to participate as essential voters, but be part of different spaces called the Gathering Space, where they have a membership-based, celebrities all are pumping up, right, the importance of getting out the vote. So it wasn't, you didn't have to be part of a special community or a certain class or a fraternity. Everyone, no matter your race, no matter your economic status, was engaged. So even door knocking in the area that we had a chance to door knock, we found out that we actually were the first ones who ever showed up to those houses. That just shows you that there still is a need for more people to be involved, even though there's a lot of money that's being raised. Resources, is so necessary. And on those doors, talking with people, I learned that Georgia is not really a red state. Georgia is a suppressed state, right? There was this assumption that we were going to come, across a lot of people who were diehard Republicans or red, and like we had to really, convert them over, right? But what we found out is that folks didn't really have the same type of culture that we have in Minnesota of openly talking about their politics, openly talking about their vote, openly talking about certain things they want in their agenda. And even our experience with listening and seeing some of the rhetoric had it really extreme. I'm sure, Ron, you was there way longer than we were. We were there for probably about 3 days. But extreme rhetoric of from the other side, saying that Senator Warnock will break open all the prisons, and the prisoners will come out and be killing your babies and raping your daughters. And it was really ridiculous. But that just goes to show you the supremacy and the fear that is used down there, not only in Georgia, but in those southern states as well. So it was very victorious. It meant a lot to get that win. Not only just the representation, but the people who put their literal lives on the line, right? They going against institutional power that was really heavily financed to push a propaganda that was trying to suppress the Black vote. So the work is not done. I definitely see that there needs to be more cultivating of those voters there, cultivating folks to, like myself, open and found more civic engagement organizations. Stacey Abrams is like literally a queen, in Georgia, rightfully so. But I would love to see more development of leadership down there as they continue to protect their vote.
That's awesome. And I want to thank you for doing what you do locally, and then going to Georgia. That's just great. We need more people doing that. And then the last thing I have to say, and James might appreciate this because I always got to bring this up. I lived in North Carolina for a long time, and I moved here 12 years ago. And we need you guys to go down there next. We got to get that state straightened out. I thought that they would beat Georgia, but I guess I was wrong. But that's the next target for you guys, please. I'm going to shift our conversation to Alyssa a little bit. I want to get her perspectives. Do you think we'll ever get to a day when Black people, Jewish people, people who have been historically marginalized can make effective change without facing extreme and often violent backlash by white supremacists? Do you think we'll reach that day?
That's a really very good question. I don't know. I really don't know how long they will cling to their hate, in the words of James Baldwin. What they are aware of is that Fannie Lou Hamer said, "You can't have your democracy until I get mine." We do not live in a democracy. We live in a republic, which the dictionary defines as a state in which supreme power is held by the people and their elected representatives, in which has an elected or nominated president rather than a monarch. We talk about democracy as though we have it, but we are still pursuing the real idea of democracy, where the people govern what happens in this country. And very obviously, what happened at the US Capitol demonstrates that that is a great threat to a very serious group of people who are intent on maintaining power. This country was founded, they wrestled with it, I should say, the way that the country was founded with the Articles of Confederation that came out in 1784. They weren't strong enough to give the federal government power over foreign affairs, so they had to meet again as a constitutional Congress in 1787 to come up with the idea of the first compromise they ever made was on whose back? Mine and yours, the 3/5 compromise for representation in Congress. And while it backfired on the South in some ways, it has still existed to this day to suppress Black people. This is the reason that our vote continues to be suppressed. It's the reason that George Floyd can be killed in the street and we just keep marching forward. It's the reason that a certain group of people can suggest what happened at the Capitol. We should just forget it and keep moving. We have to demand democracy because they obviously have had 400 years of practice and are not good at it. So how long they will hold on to their hate, I have no idea. But Dr. King said, how long will Black people revolt against what's happening? It's up to white people to decide.
You're not going to stop there, are you?
Wow. Bars, bars.
No, thank you. Thank you for sharing. That is absolutely awesome. James, I want to get you in this conversation. A week ago, it seems like a year ago, today we had white supremacists and domestic terrorists attack our nation's capital. How did that make you feel? How have you reflected on that since then, processed that? What advice do you have for Black professionals and other Black, anybody, to deal with these complicated historical occurrences? Talk to me.
Well, thank you, Stan. Thank you, Al, for having me on. Thanks for putting me behind Ron, Anika, and Lissa to give some knowledge, but I'm gonna do the best I can with it. Two things. One is, I think we need to realize that we don't have the ability to stop right now. We don't have the ability to say that we can't continue on. And that's the thing. And I'm gonna cut my video off real quick. I'm having some computer issues, so I'm do this. Can you still hear me, Stan?
Yes, hear you. Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, I'm just gonna cut the video off. For me, it's two things. We can't stop doing what we need to do. So we can't stop moving forward on racial equity. We can't stop moving forward on ending white supremacy. We can't stop moving forward on, as Anika and Ron alluded to, making sure we get out the vote and vote to put new people in office. What Wednesday of last week taught me was that white supremacy, white privilege still exists. It taught me that having worked at the Capitol for a senator from Georgia in 1991 while I was in law school, I know how secure that Capitol is and always has been. So for me to see people just be able to walk through the Capitol with guns and pipe bombs and nooses and other things lets me know that white privilege not only exists, but there's also some support of it from those who are supposed to be securing the Capitol. Let's be real clear. That didn't just happen and nobody knew about it. But that doesn't matter to us in this sense. Dr. King knows full well what it's like, and Dejon Lewis did too, to get beaten on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. He knows what it's like to get things thrown at you and placed in the Birmingham jail. But they never stopped fighting for justice. They never spent too much time talking about what white people don't like or what white people hate about us, or as Lissa talked about, when this will ever stop. It may never stop, but we can't ever stop either as far as moving forward, as far as making a roadmap for our young people, a roadmap for those that we need to make for it. So I'm excited. I mean, I got off my chest with a blog I just wrote about, some of the things that look like to me. And, you can take a look at that if you want to, but for the most part, I want to get more people voting. I got to give a shout out to Raphael Warnock, a Morehouse brother, class of 91, I'm class of 89. And I got to give a shout out to Stacey Abrams, a Spelman sister, because if you all didn't think HBCUs were important, you know now. And another sister is about to be vice president from Howard University, Kamala Harris. So if you didn't think they were important in sending our kids there, I really want to say this to the Minnesotans that I know with Black children, send your kids to Black colleges. They may not stay there 4 years if they don't want to, but they need to have that experience, get that grounding and foundation. So Stan, I went way off what you asked me to do, but wanted to just share that as well.
No, that's great. And I expected you to do that, exactly what you did. I worked with you a little bit too long, James. I think I already know this answer to this next question I'm gonna ask you, James. Is it necessary for organizations and corporations to be publicly speaking out and against the attacks on our country? Does this apply even when they're nonpartisan or political organization? Like what should we be doing in this space right now? Uh-oh, you're on mute.
Oops, there we go. There we go. This may not be a popular opinion, Stan, but I don't really put put too much stock into corporate statements right now. So keep in mind, we made a lot of corporate statements after George Floyd. My CEO was one of the first to do that. But more importantly, we changed our actions. We said, you know what, the urgency of getting more Black and brown people in leadership roles is what we need to focus on. Pretty soon, we'll announce how many Black and brown people we've added to our board, and it's going to be far beyond any company that I know of here in the Twin Cities. We also are going to talk about how much money we're spending with Black and brown owned businesses. That's what I care more about, whether they make a statement or not. I'll say this, some companies who make statements are just as systemically racist in their own operations as they would be talking about somebody else in a statement. So I'm not really too enthralled about another statement. I would say this, companies need to be held accountable. So if you come up to me or my CEO and say, hey, what are you all doing to address this oppression and white supremacy and racial equity, we should be able to tell you. We should be able to tell you about the wonderful work Adrian is doing with the COVID-19 vaccine to address vaccine hesitancy in our communities, make sure we address the truth about the vaccine. We should be able to tell you that we are hiring more and going to hire more nurses and doctors of color, more Black people. That's what I care about. A lot of people want us to make a statement, and to be quite honest, my CEO of going back and forth talking about that, but I'm less inclined about making a statement. Let's just do some work, put some stuff to action, and making sure that we address this white supremacy head on.
James, coming from my background is communications and public relations and speaking and writing, and I couldn't agree with you more. I've been asked to write statement after statement after statement. It's time for people to take some action. And so I appreciate you saying that. The next question, I'm gonna get all of you in on this one. And so let me ask it. Do you think last week's attack on our nation will open the eyes and hearts and minds of people, all around us who have willfully been ignorant to the dangers of this administration? Like, do you think that this is doing anything to the masses of people? I think there's a lot of people that are, fringe people that nothing will ever change them. I'm talking about the people who we see every day. I'll take volunteers on who wants to start.
I can start. So I think it may have a small impact on some. Overall, I don't know that it's going to change the minds of those who truly believe that what President Trump has been saying is true and right. And I say that because, I'm a social media person. I monitor the world through social media. And unlike some other people, I didn't unfriend my friends and associates who are open Trump supporters, because I wanted them to hear and see the messages that I put on social media. So if I unfriend them, they couldn't see the messages that I put out about Black Lives Matter and why it matters and how it matters. And, whether they took it to heart or whether it made a difference for them or not, I'll never know. I doubt it did, but at least I was able to get that message out to them. And so the one thing that I was looking for after the uprising or the Capitol takeover was to see how my friends and associates that are Trump supporters would respond. And only one of them, and there are several, and only one of them responded that what happened was wrong and that, something should be done. Still didn't go far, so far to say that President Trump should be impeached and that he incited it, but, at least acknowledge that what happened was wrong and that is not the way that our democracy works or should work. And so when my other friends and associates finally, posted their responses, there were excuses. There were excuses for President Trump. There was acquittal of his involvement in it. There was no acknowledgement that he had anything to do with the Capitol takeover. It was those people. They made their individual decisions. It had nothing to do with President Trump. He did not incite any rioting. And so, I would say 98% of the people that I know who are Trump supporters that changed nothing for them. They still support Trump. They still believe in what he says. They still want him to be president. And, you know, they keep saying, well, all the people there weren't rioters. Some of them were just protesting. And it's like, well, but when it was Black Lives Matter, all the protesters became rioters. And so why is it different now? You know, and I even reached out to NBC News because I watch the Today Show every day when I get up. I've been doing that for years. And when they were doing their reporting, the label said the Capitol protesters. And I wrote them on Twitter and I said, I need you to update your labels to be more accurate, because those were not protesters scaling the Capitol like spider monkeys. Those were not protesters carrying those zip ties as to take somebody hostage. Those were not protesters breaking glasses, stealing mail. Those were rioters, and you need to label them as so when you're doing your news reporting. Otherwise, you are doing an injustice to America, and you're not doing your job. Now, I haven't been back on Twitter to see if they responded, but I haven't seen them label them as protesters again since then. So perhaps it worked, but I don't think it's going to make a difference for those people who truly believe in Trump and believe in what he says, which is unfortunate, but those people have always existed and they've always had the feelings and thoughts and beliefs that they've had. He's just brought them out. So I really don't expect a huge change in that group of people.
Thank you.
I think that's sad, but I think it's so true. If anybody knows, you know, if anybody knows anything about me, I'm an eternal optimist. I always think that brighter days are ahead, that we haven't seen the best that we have to offer yet. The best is still yet to come. In this conversation, though, this isn't just about the mob that was insurrecting at the Capitol as domestic terrorists, right? It's about the 4 or 5 years of the perpetual lies and gaslighting of this country that led to that moment. And if those 4 or 5 years of these lies, outright lies, gaslighting, otherizing, all these other things, locking up kids in cages, banning Muslims from coming to the country, denying the existence of a virus that has now killed 350,000 people, a massive tax cut that the vast majority of which went to the very, very rich people. Like, if none of that stuff was enough for you to say, wait a minute, something's wrong, but this moment all of a sudden is going to be, I don't think that people's minds have been changed. I think that the excuses are starting to run out. And that's when you're going to start to see people say, wait a minute, this is wrong. This is not us. This is not who we are. Every time we say those words, this is not who we are actually pushing and shifting the responsibility and the accountability that's required to actually solve these issues, right? So everybody keeps saying, this isn't the America that I know. It's like, you got to look over the course of history. This group of people, like Adrienne had just said, has existed since the founding of this country. And at every single turn, at every single moment where the country is getting ready to shift towards the direction of honoring those who've been marginalized or vulnerable or Black or brown, there's some sort of an uprising. You can look back to Selma, you can look back to Tulsa, you can look back to some of these other communities that had their own economic systems and things like that. You can look towards integration of schools. Like, at all of these moments, there is an insurrection. The thing that the current occupant in the White House has done better than anybody, though, has been to honor their voices, tell them that he loves them, tell them there are good people on both sides, inciting them, revving them up with all the lies, and then pointing them towards us and pointing them towards the Capitol, right? No one has ever been successful in doing so, except for this guy. So I think for us, it's good because now we've been knowing this, but the veil is off, right? Anybody who stands next to this president, anybody who stands next to this party, I'll put that all the way out there, is complicit in this. If you voted for this man, you are complicit in this. If you've given him excuses over the last 4 years, you are complicit in this. If you have not challenged your other elected officials in the same party to stand up for Black lives or to make movement on policing or to do the kinds of things that we've been calling for, you are complicit in all of this. And as a society, we cannot forget that as a fact and allow people just to move on without taking accountability. I don't want to unite with people who are domestic terrorists. I don't want to unite with people who otherize me and otherize the countries that we come from and call them, you know, I won't say the word on this conversation, right? What I do want is accountability. And we can't have a conversation about unity until there are actions towards accountability.
Alyssa?
Thank you. Dr. King said the three enemies, the three evils of democracy are militarism, racism, and capitalism. And that's where we're really sitting at this intersection in history. Dr. King was prophesying. He was telling us a prophecy. He said, look, if these three things converge, they will threaten democracy. When the current occupant of the White House was elected, he said, I'm here to dismantle democracy. That's what he said I'm going to do. I'm going to dismantle the administrative state. And that is what he has done. This has been 400 years in the making. This is a central problem, which Frederick Douglass wisely told us, no doubt the problem of the 21st century will be the problem of the color line. And that's what we are fighting over. Malcolm X asked the question, who are you and what did you have and what was yours? He argued that if you can't answer those questions for yourself, you lack the fundamental answers to your own identity, which white people have stolen from Black people's experience and have replaced with myths like meritocracy and manifest destiny, white racelessness, monoculture, and moral elevation, all things that are lies. So the same thing applies to white people. If they can't answer the questions, who are you and what did you have and what was yours, except for whiteness, that's what they're fighting to keep. That is what he is protecting. Protect the white woman who's creating the Aryan race. Protect the white man who's all powerful and smart and wise and deserves everything. It's a lie as old as this country. And all he has done is to give people a platform that they've heretofore had to do underground and through dog whistling. Now, the last thing I will say, and I have much respect for Ron, this is not about Ron, but Democrats and Republicans have colluded on Black oppression for 400 years. So the party, I don't dig, because it doesn't matter. Black people are suffering under the weight of oppression from both parties who have colluded on this. What has happened here was not just the practice of one party and was not the result of the last 4 years. That is just my position with respect to this most beautiful brother who has taken us over.
So because you
And
did
I
that,
also, oh, go ahead.
I'm going to change the order and give Ron. Do you have anything you want to say to that?
Yeah, here's the deal. I think that we'd all be fools if we thought that racism was there's a monopoly on racism as it relates to political parties. I don't think that that's false whatsoever. As it relates to this moment last week, I don't think that there's much Democratic Party culpability. As it relates to white supremacy, yeah, there's a lot of work that we all got to do. One of the reasons why I'm involved in this party is because we got to start with our own first, right? We got to figure out the people who, we have to challenge our own first. But the conversation about racism and white supremacy, I don't think that my party is absolved of that in the least. And we need to continue to challenge ourselves to take that level of accountability too.
Okay. Thank you. Anika?
Absolutely. And I just wanted to pretty much continue on with what Lisa was saying about the accountability that needs to happen on both sides, right? For politics, we know politics is not fair and it's a game of chess, not checkers, right? There's multiple moves that goes into how not only policy is made, but rhetoric that is developed out of moments like crisis like these, right? And what we saw at the Capitol was horrible, to say the least. We all have those shared opinions. But what we're also seeing now is certain rhetoric that's being utilized that we have fought for being utilized in this way to remove accountability. For instance, we know that in the height of the murders of George Floyd and so many people, we have already claimed racism to be a public health crisis, correct? Right? So where we would think that was something that was highlighting our issue, that when a public health system is not operating and when we have racism, we are literally dying on the lines. But now we hear in the news the same narrative of this is a public health crisis. those aren't rioters. They were super spreaders, and we now need to have them tested. They should stay at home. We need to provide care to them. We need to provide care to the Capitol. And it's ridiculous because we have seen this type of narrative that we build out to protect ourselves being weaponized against us to protect them, right? So we need to have a really clear, concise racial equity addressing anti-Blackness, because when we talk about racism, we then want to get into multiculturalism, but we're not focusing on what have happened on the backs of Black folks here on American soil. And also, we've seen, like I said, with public health. Another thing I want to mention that I was reminded by when you were speaking, we need to be very, very, very unapologetic with how we are addressing this new administration that's coming forth. Because what we have seen, and I'm someone who studied deeply with the school to prison pipeline, right? And have seen how the Columbine shootings, the mass shootings that happen in high schools have literally impacted and created zero tolerance policies that impacted our African-American Black students, where it's supposed to protect high schools that were getting, shot up by white, middle class, upper middle class, young people, but yet we were weaponized and we were the ones who was being villainized. So again, moving forward, we're starting to see, President-elect Joe Biden use rhetoric like thugs, right? And these are these thugs, these monsters, these violent people, right? But we need to make sure that also in politics, we have double speak. So when he's talking about these thugs and he's talking about these rioters and he's talking about these violent people, that we are going to be very sure that who you are talking about is not us. Because as policy come through and as policy is implemented, and we know with a President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, as we respect and we voted, but we know their history with criminal justice. We know their history when it comes to mass incarceration. And we need to be very, very concise when we are not only proposing for a mass incarceration or charges to be brought, but we understand that those are not going to impact our communities, that you need to go down out there into those neighborhoods where those folks who was at the Capitol in that insurrection, that's the people you need to be targeting, not Black and brown folks. So I just want to really be clear on that, because sometimes we fall asleep on the wheel and we think that they have our best interests, but yet we're not clear on a racial lens of who they're talking about and who those laws are going to impact.
Thank you. James?
They've said it all. Only thing I'll add is if the people who believe that racism is a public health crisis, you have to fund with resources to address the crisis. So you can't tell me in a statement that it's a crisis and then you don't put millions and billions of dollars towards that. So let's start with our state. We've identified it. Representative Ruth Richardson has done an amazing job. They had hearings this summer with Representative Rena Moran. They got, I think, 35, 40 recommendations that they put forth at $1 billion cost. If we fund none of that, it's not really a crisis. It's another game that people are playing to say, we're gonna pretend we're gonna do something about it. Similarly, if we don't charge all the people that violated federal laws and also attempted to kidnap and murder representatives from the House and Senate fully, charge them fully, we are once again not addressing a crisis. We're just saying, okay, it's pretend again. So I say for those things, once again, I go back to what I always talk about, action. It didn't surprise me. I mean, folks are not going to change who they are. I want folks to stop saying, though, that this is not America, though. I think this will help lead towards that, because America was founded on racial violence. It was founded on taking land from Native Americans. It was founded on slavery, Jim Crow. It was founded on the slave code. It was founded on taking things from people and violence towards their people. It was founded on rapes against Black women and families. We need to say those things out loud. So now folks will realize this is what created those folks who went to the Capitol and thought they had the privilege to do that. And if that's the case, until we start addressing those things directly, we won't change. So hopefully, Stan, that will let people know that we don't need to, as President Trump tried to do, take out systemic racism and white supremacy and white privilege discussions in diversity training. If you don't remember that, he did an executive order that said, hey, you get any federal money, you can't talk about any of these things that are reality. And you had some companies, not mine, but you had some companies saying, man, well, we can't do this now because this executive order says we can't. We're going to jeopardize our federal money. We're going to tell the truth regardless. And we're going to tell the truth that will help us lead toward action. So that's what this current administration has to do. And it's a great opportunity. I mean, I've been a lifelong Democrat/independent, but I'm not blindly following anybody. I'm going to hold them accountable. And now we have the wherewithal to hold them accountable. We have people in place, and we have the Senate and the House and the administration to hold it accountable. And we can do that. And think about it. This administration has a racial equity pillar. They have a whole pillar that's about racial equity, and that's what we didn't do. Let's lean into that and do some things around that. And I'd be remiss to say this, and I want to get Adrian's thoughts around this. Healthcare has to be at the forefront of it. COVID-19 is not going away tomorrow, even with the vaccine, and it has disproportionately impacted our Black community and therefore also our Black businesses and our Black family. So if we don't address that as well, that destruction can lead towards a long way of going in the wrong direction for our people as well. So that's something we definitely have to address as well.
James, you're reading my mind. We're getting ready to shift to Miss Adrian. I just want to say a couple of things though. One, I needed this panel on Wednesday night and Thursday morning. Where were you guys? Because I wasn't doing well. We got smart people here, so I appreciate you all. And leave it to our country right now that we could find a way to have a pandemic with 350 people dead, 1,000 people dead. That's not the top story anymore. And so leave it to this country for that. And Adrian, I think we definitely want you to talk about, what you saw last week and the masses of people that don't care about the health of anybody else. And what does that mean to what we're trying to accomplish with this pandemic right now?
Well, when I have to tell you, when I saw the uprising, I saw several things. So as I have multiple hats that, I put on when I'm living. And so my first hat was as a Black woman from Georgia who has driven through a Ku Klux Klan demonstration. I immediately felt fear. I immediately felt sadness that we're still in that place. As an infection preventionist, I felt anger because our COVID numbers were starting to go down ever so slightly. And when I looked at them, all I saw was a super spreader event. You have the audacity to show up in great numbers, which is the first evil. Then you want to take over our Capitol building with no mask. I saw no hand sanitizer without, of course they weren't social distancing because you can't social distance and, run over people at the same time. And so what I saw was people who were, probably together because what we saw was them taking over the Capitol, but they had to get to Washington. They had to find somewhere to stay. They had to find somewhere to eat. And so these people had probably been in Washington for several days, staying in our hotels, eating in our restaurants, being together without masking. And so what I'm seeing is all across the United States, these people are going to go back and spread the love and the wealth of COVID back to their friends and families and loved ones right when we started to see a slight, ever so slight decrease in the number of cases. And it's unfortunate that our administration didn't see enough importance in stopping the transmission of COVID-19 to say to their followers, we understand you're upset. We know you want to come to Washington, but stay home. You can post your protest virtually or, but for our administration to encourage people to come in droves and get together and be close together and not wear masks, it is beyond me. And so we know that we're not out of the woods with this pandemic. Yes, we vaccinated, thousands of people, and that's great. But we have to vaccinate thousands more before we can get anywhere near saying that we're out of the woods with this disease. And so, the holding back of the virus, of the vaccine, makes absolutely no sense. So you say, we're not going to tell you what to do. States have to figure out their own system of vaccinating, but in turn, we're going to micromanage what you do and hold back the vaccine because we don't think that you all have enough sense to figure out how you can administer this vaccine to people and make sure people get their second doses. It's contradictory, it's ridiculous, and it's counterintuitive to what we're trying to do. People who work in infection prevention and public health, we know how to do this. It's always good to have guidance from the federal government, but when you don't, the states can figure it out for themselves. But this administration has just kind of done this circular thing. You know how when you're on your computer and you get stuck in the circle of death, the wheel of death, and you're like, okay, I'm not going to get anything done because I'm stuck in the circle of death. And that is what it's been like ever since COVID first knocked on our doors. We have been stuck in the circle of death of COVID-19 for the simple fact that this administration, one, didn't believe it existed, two, didn't believe it was going to be a problem, and three, decided to keep information from the health professionals and the public, and also decided that they were smarter than all the public health people who work at the CDC. You know, so there's just this myriad of issues that have come from the administration that have plagued this virus. But the one good thing that's come out of it is that we've been able to truly shine a national light on the health disparities that occur in our country. You know, we've always known that health disparities existed. We've always known that Black and brown people have more hypertension and more heart disease and more diabetes. People weren't talking about it. We were talking about it. The rest of the world did not talk about it. They didn't want to acknowledge it. They didn't want to deal with it. And now the conversations are occurring every day. So that's the one good thing that has come out of this is we're talking about the disparities. We're looking at ways to kind of bridge that gap. We have a lot of work to do. The gap is not going to be bridged quickly, but at least we're having those conversations. And some people in the medical field are starting to actually face their own biases that they denied before. Well, you can't deny them anymore. You can't. And if you do, we're now starting to hold them accountable. And if we're not holding them accountable, somebody is. I mean, I feel like the country has just kind of woken up and they're like, oh, well, we should do better. And, you know, for instance, I live in Rosemont and they have invited me. There's a group of white people in Rosemont that decided enough is enough, had a town hall, invited me to come and just, you know, speak my truth. And so that has resulted in different groups of people in Rosemont, you know, trying to figure out, well, what can we do to help? You know, we need to use our white privilege to help those who don't have it. Those were not conversations that we could even get close to addressing before COVID-19 in this administration. And so, you know, I think we'll get to a point where things are better, but it is going to be years. First of all, we're not going to be done with COVID-19 for, you know, a couple of years. 2022 is, you know, closer than we think, but we will still be dealing with this in 2022. We cannot deal with the other health disparities that exist in this country until we get through COVID. So let's be clear, this is not an end all to all the issues that we've been dealing with, but the conversations will continue. And as we as Black people, as we continue to hold people accountable, force them to address their biases and force them to give us better care, it will get better, but we didn't get to this point yesterday. This is years and years and years of denying us and neglecting us and saying that we can tolerate pain better than everybody else. It's going to take us years and years and years to get to the point where we get rid of all those lies and those myths and get to a point where healthcare is more equitable for everyone, but especially brown and Black people. But I think we can do it. And I think the conversations have started, they're going to continue. And I'm excited to see that things improve for our people.
Thank you. I'm going to go around a minute, but I wanted to say a couple of things. You know, our team that kind of puts these together, we had planned originally to have the discussion be on the vaccination today. And we were designated 2 programs for the vaccination. This whole virtual town hall was created out of the necessity and the desire to save our people's lives. And, you know, as I listen to you talk, this thing that happened in DC, it's further contributing indirectly and directly to death, because we're not talking about the thing that we should be talking about today. And so I think with me saying that, I do want to let you, Adrian, just give us a quick update on where we are with vaccines, just briefly, and then I'm gonna go around again.
So vaccines have been given in every state. Every state is doing something different, of course, because we didn't have federal guidance to have us do it in a streamlined process. In terms of Minnesota, we have done fairly well with vaccinating our essential healthcare workers first, and that has been the focus. They are, group 1A, and I'm sure all of you have heard about 1A, 1B, 1C. We have been getting our allocations as a state fairly regularly. Again, the federal government decided to hold back doses instead of just sending the doses out. The doses are ready. Pfizer, BioNTech, they have millions of doses ready to ship out. They can't ship them because the federal government has told them to wait. And so we're not able to vaccinate as many people as quickly as we would like to, but we are vaccinating. We have vaccinated upwards of about 50,000 people. And if you go to the Minnesota Department of Health website, they have a really great graphic where they are tracking how many vaccines have been given in the state of Minnesota. We're getting there. Some people have received their second doses. Others are moving into getting their second doses this week and next week. So by the end of January, we should have a nice cadre of people in Minnesota that have received both doses of the vaccine. That doesn't get us out of the woods. Again, it is going to take a long time for us to vaccinate enough people that we can have some type of community protection, but also we're still studying the vaccine. We don't know if the vaccine prevents you from transmitting COVID. So there's a possibility that you could have the vaccine on board, get exposed to someone with COVID. You wouldn't get sick with COVID, but you may carry it and transmit it to someone else. And we just don't know yet. So those studies are ongoing with the vaccine trials. As we know more about that, we'll be able to say with a stronger mind that, yes, you are protected, and yes, you can protect others with the vaccine. But until we can say that, the vaccine is not an end all to everything. People will have to continue masking. They will have to continue social distancing. They will have to continue doing, cleaning their hands. And, if you can get the vaccine, get the vaccine. We'll talk about that more, I know, in another show, but we are getting there. We're vaccinating people every day. And we have, several thousand people who have been vaccinated. So we are on, a good trajectory to have a lot of people vaccinated by the end of January.
Thank you. Thank you for that update. James, just real quick and following up on that, I know, you work around a bunch of doctors. Any thoughts you have about where we are with the vaccines right now?
You got it from the nurse, the RN, the medical professional. I am not that, so nope, nothing else to add.
Okay, that's a first, man. James has nothing. Can y'all believe that? Let's mark this down. I'm sorry, I'm playing. Lissa, as a historian, and we know you're a wellness advocate too. Do you have any thoughts that you can talk about when it comes in terms of the vaccine right now?
I believe as Adrian does that there's this double talking that happens in America. You see, they tell you something's good for you when it really actually isn't good for you. And then they tell you something's bad for you and it really actually is good for you. And so this double talking has created an environment where we are asking ourselves as a community, should we get vaccinated? My gosh, what else do we have? I mean, this kind of double talking, these kinds of lies, this farce, this false narrative that's created is really costing us our lives. And we really need our Black health professionals. I'm so glad that Adrian's here and that James is working in his field to be able to tell us that this is safe for us to take, that we really do need to take it for our own lives and to protect others. When I just interviewed Claudia Rankin, I'm so fortunate. I just got to interview her for her new book for my podcast. And she actually went to a white doctor, thought that something was the matter, and he told her she was cool, she was copacetic, no problem. 3 months later, she goes to see a sister, a Black doctor, and she finds out she has cancer. Claudia Rankin is, I mean, I think if you wouldn't take care of Claudia Rankin, you surely are not going to take care of me. So we have to do what Adrian said. We have to press forward in our healthcare system. We have to do what Anika said. We have to press the administration for justice and equity in healthcare. We were already living in the middle of multiple pandemics as Black people before this pandemic ever came. An economic pandemic, an education pandemic, a health pandemic. It has been nonstop for us. So the one thing we do have is skills to cope.
Believe it or not, we have a new president that's going to get started next week, and kind of want to shift gears a little bit and talk about that. I want to hear from all of you. You know, as far as the feelings that you're having right now, how are you feeling about this inauguration and what could happen, what might happen? I don't want to put words in your mouths at all, but you know, what are you thinking? How are you feeling about what is going to happen in terms of the change, maybe a shift in this country, the dialogue, but also about just the flat out safety of our people? Like, how are you guys feeling? Nika, you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. I have, if 2020 have taught me anything, it's to be more spiritually grounded, right? And really value what matters. And like, that's family, that's friendship, that's the precious time that we have. And understanding that life is not unlimited, at least on this earth, right? And that what we put our attention to will grow. And, you know, especially being a vice president of the Minneapolis NAACP and having multiple leadership opportunities and really developing in that role, I learned that fear is a poor leader. You should not ever be led through fear. But yet we do see that people are moved by fear and yet make really poor choices because they are leading and moving and living through a place of scarcity. And so what I hope to see and what I hope to model is that we are not being led through a fear lens, but we are being led through a lens of faith and a lens of also evidence-based. That's why I really appreciate hearing from Adrian, nurse doctor, professional Adrian Thornton, around this information in public health that many of us, may lack that knowledge, right? So we go off of other knowledge that's usually out of a place of ignorance. So I think moving forward that we open up our minds more to do our own research, that we lean on our experts in public policy, we lean on our experts and build more trusted relationships with our politicians. What I'm super excited about in Minnesota is that we have Representative Cedric Fraser, we have Representative John Thompson, we have Esther, we have Representative Esther Ruth, we have some amazing African-American folks who's in office and that we can really lean on. And then in Minnesota, we have accessibility like no other. Some places you go to New York, they couldn't even get close to their senator. But here we do have that accessibility. So I think it's really about deepening those relationships, looking forward to what do we need, what can we have, what will we fight for, and not taking no, as not telling ourselves no before we even hear it too, making sure we don't have a self-defeated type of mentality, even though we went through hundreds of years of challenges, right? Like the resiliency, but what I like to say is the courage and the bravery, because our future really depends on us showing up. Our future really depends on us not only being the experts, but passing down the information so people can make more important, knowledgeable decisions, especially with their lives. Been very fortunate, in the Twin Cities and Ramsey County and Hennepin County with the resources that have been brought forth to engage our communities around COVID. I I know like the deadline was in 2020, but hopefully we can still see some more resources because it's so important. We have also learned that our institutions is literally our backbones. Our community organizations are literally the backbones to making sure information and services are being provided, and that our community who may not even know who their governor is are going to know who the big mom is, who's going to know who their pastor is, who's going to know, where to get some food, from the food shelf. So our essential workers are really important, as well as our future. So that's there's a lot to look forward to, but I think most importantly, we need to be hopeful while we're doing it. And hopeful doesn't mean that you're walking in ignorance. It means that you have a outlook that's much greater than what the barrier is before us.
That was awesome because when you watching these national stories all day, you just gave practical things that are around us here, and I think people needed to hear that. So thank you for sharing that. Others, I want to kind of go around on that. Ron.
Yeah, I'm excited. Anika, is sharing your enthusiasm and optimism for the future, simply because we've known this for quite a while, but the rest of the world is starting to catch up of the courage and the resilience that we've had to put together to even stay existing in this country, right? When COVID-19 hit and when George Floyd was murdered, what I saw on the ground gave me a lot of hope. I saw a lot of people without education, a lot of people without the credentials, a lot of people who didn't have the resumes that we all have on this panel, stepping up and contributing whatever they can, and also leading in the moment. I saw a deep level of community resiliency. I saw a lot of organic leaders being developed on the ground. When I went to Georgia, it was beautiful to see the coalition of Black and Brown organizers and organizations elevating the vote, and people who were undocumented, who didn't have the right to vote, yet were knocking doors to make sure that other people exercise theirs. People who had felony records, who haven't had their rights restored yet, were knocking doors and making sure that other people exercise their votes. The coalition that was built to elect a Democratic president and get the current guy in the White House out is a wide coalition, 81 million voters. That meant Black folk made the difference, brown folk made the difference, young people made the difference, women made the difference, people with disabilities made the difference, those with different gender identities made the difference. And if we can keep that coalition together now, beyond the election, right? I tell people all the time, election day isn't the finish line. Election day was the starting line. If we can keep that coalition together moving forward in this administration, we can do the things that we talked about on this call. We can make sure that we hold the administration accountable to its priorities. The administration has 4 priorities in the first 100 days. Number 1, COVID-19. This is in no order, but COVID-19, economic recovery, racial equity, and climate change, right? And it seems like these are going to be the pillars that are going to be the focus. And to James's point, we need to lean into that then. We need to ask the questions, what does that mean for us tangibly? What does that mean for us practically? Make sure that we have the education and the knowledge, and we keep holding folks accountable. I'm excited about the next generation. They are not quiet about how they want the world to look. They are not quiet about using their voices and contributing to the moment and demanding change, and not only demanding change, but leading us towards that change, right? We have a lot of things that we can look forward to. The thing that we can't do, though, we can't just skip over the problems that we're facing. We can't think that someone else is going to come and save us out of these problems. We need to look at ourselves. We need to see what we can contribute. We need to make sure that we're developing the next generation. We need to make sure that we're bringing other people into this movement, because the people that get left out of this conversation, right? Poor folks, working class people, other folks on the margins, they need to be a part of this coalition too. And they need to know that not only are we fighting for them, but they have a role for themselves to help aid in this fight. So I'm very excited because in this country, when we've faced some of the toughest challenges, we always come back with something better, right? No matter what iteration it is, it might not be enough. It might not be exactly where we want to be, but we always figure out a way to put our best foot forward and get ourselves in a better position than what we were. And I think that with the three-headed monster that we're facing right now, an economic recession, COVID-19, and the world now paying at least a little bit more attention to the racial inequities, I think that we're going to have something cool come out of this. And yeah, I'm just really excited and really optimistic for the future, only because I've seen a level of strength, a level of courage, a level of resilience. in some of the toughest moments I think this country's ever faced. We've shown those qualities, and I think that we're going to carry those qualities moving forward.
Thank you. James?
Yes. I want to go back to what Anika started to talk about. And I think the reality is all politics is local. Let's be saying again, all politics local. So no matter what President Biden, the Senate, and also the Congress, what they do or they pass, it typically, and Ron knows better than I, will funnel through the state and or local governments and or county governments. So if we don't have representation there that we have relationship with, you can have all great things happening in the federal government and it never impact you directly. So the fact that she shouted out Esther, John Thompson, Cedric Frazier, my boy, Ron's frat brother, and just my personal friend, that they're now in the legislature is just amazing. And that's something that's going to change here in Minnesota, I think, the trajectory for Black folks. We have one of the largest posse caucuses, people of color and indigenous caucus that we've ever had. And now they have enough blocks of voting that they can disrupt some of the things that people want to push through in a way that they pushed through before and ignored Black people. So I do think it's important to realize that the federal government is going to do great things. Hopefully, we're going to hold them accountable. But more locally, I'm excited about the opportunities we have here. We have an opportunity to elect a new mayor of Brooklyn Park, who could be a Black man, in Hollis Winston. We have a lot of opportunities to change what's happening locally, and then that's going to impact us even more. School board elections, we've just had some recently, added more Black people on school boards. Having worked with Minneapolis Public Schools like you did, Stan, for many years, if you don't have that, we don't change the trajectory of our students, our Black and brown students. So I'm excited for the local change that has happened. I'm excited for the people like Cedric, John, and Esther who are going to need our support. And I'll say this to you, doing and going to vote at an election is the easy part. Supporting a politician once he or she is in office and has to deal with the systemic racism that we talk about, but they deal with daily when they're trying to get something passed or moved forward, is the key that we're going to have. I never forget when Mayor Carter said, when he got elected, he said, okay, now the hard work starts. And now the hard work starts about helping me move this agenda forward. What are you going to do? Where are you going to lean in? That's where we have to lean in as well. So I'm excited about the national piece, Stan. I'm more excited about the local politics that we have here, that we can actually change something.
I'm excited that both of Anika and James, you mentioned that, because I believe, this is overwhelming and you just feel like nationally, well, what can we really do? But if you really understand the local impact that you can have, there's a lot of things we can do. So thank you for sharing that. People need to hear that. Listen, I'm gonna ask a question a little bit different because you are a historian. What is this moment in history telling us about America?
That America is the America that's never been. I mean, that's really what Langston Hughes was talking about. We've never been the America that we propose to be in the world. And if you're a student of history, Donald Trump was necessary. He's necessary because there was nothing else that was going to jar this country to see. But Black people have been telling this story for 400 years, the same story. And it's as though it fell on somebody who was living in a totally different reality. And now people who perceive themselves to be white are stuck with the question, what Stokely Carmichael was asked by Mike Wallace in 1966. What can white people do in the movement? He asked Stokely. And Stokely said, civilize other white people. And they have to sit with the idea that they are incapable of civilizing their own people, and that they need to really wrestle with that before making this all our problem. James Baldwin talked about the idea that we can empower ourselves by giving them their problems back. Particularly, he talked about the N-word. He said, white people must have needed that because he's never been one and he's never known any. So he can't figure out that Black people would ever have a use for one. What he was able to figure out is that white people took from the invention of whiteness everything that they did not like, such as what you saw at the Capitol, and they painted it in Black and called it the. So James Baldwin said, why don't you do them a favor and do yourself a favor and give them their problem back? I think one of the ways back to the right reality for Black people is in remembering. Lucille Clifton, the poet, said, they want me to remember, but they want me to remember their memories, but I keep remembering mine. There was a time when Black people governed, when we held all that was good in the world. In fact, the seed of life is in Africa. And as far descended as we have been, that is still the seed of life. And that is the place from which we emanate. And if we walk in that understanding and remember our own truths, we will know our way back. And that is critical. Keep remembering your memories, Beauty. And we have Anika, and we have Ron, and we have brilliance in Adrian and James and Stan. These are ours, Beauty. Walk in that truth and we'll be all right.
Gosh, I remember when I used to drive to and from work, I would listen to you on drive time. And I feel like I'm going back to that right now. So thank you for sharing, Alyssa. Anika, say something encouraging for people who might be thinking about running for office in the future. What could you say about that?
Well, in the words of Harriet Tubman, keep going, right? Keep going, keep going. We have said so much, even in this conversation, any issue, is worth running for. Any issue, if it is the racial disparities, if it is the public health crisis, if it is the violence that we have been seeing, run on those issues because you are literally the solution and you can bring up the solutions and those ideas and be our voice within that seat. And you have people power like myself. I can't wait to get into the thick of it, to making sure that we get people out to vote and we get your face out there so people can actually vote for you. So call me. My email is contact@anikabui.com.
Ron.
You have to say run like Harriet. Right on, Anika?
Hey, run like Harriet. Exactly. Thank you. See, you my brand strategist.
Ron, regardless of what these domestic terrorists try to do, we're probably still going to have an inauguration next week, right? Can you give us some thoughts?
There will be an inauguration. Yeah, I think it's important for these institutions to show strength in democracy, right? That the purpose of the riot last week, the purpose of the insurrection, the purpose of the domestic terrorism was to thwart democracy. And I think it's important to show that no matter what gets thrown at this, even though democracy is an imperfect product and we're working towards that, like Lissa said, that where we are now, we're not going to cave to that kind of insurrection. So what's going to happen, there will be an inauguration. I just got a note, the Commonwealth of DC, District of the Columbia, DC is going to, they're canceling all Airbnb reservations for the week. There's going to be an extra level of security. I mean, they're going to take this thing seriously, but I think it is important, like you said, to move forward with inauguration, that even though this transfer of power wasn't peaceful, there still will be a transfer of power, and that we'll deal with everything else after that. I think, similar to Donald Trump being here and what that meant for people waking all the way up, I think that what happened last week is a wake-up call as well, that as we're working towards democracy, as we're perfecting this union, we can't take any of this for granted. That at any moment in time, there could be an impact to that. At any moment in time, our rights to vote can be impacted and all these other things. And we've been seeing the playbook for what it looks like to take rights away from people, or never give them rights that they had earned and fought for, right? We've seen this over the course of 400 years. Why would this be any different when we're now at a point where we're starting to take power back in a very different way? And so it is important that inauguration happens next week. It is important that we continue to show that it was no accident that Ralph Warnock was elected the day before this thing popped off, right? I don't think that if these Black folks weren't running and getting elected, that there would have been as much vitriol, as much anger, and as much fear and opposition to the reality of their leadership. And so we have to show a strong show of force that we're going to keep moving forward. We're going to make this happen. These little measly attempts to dissuade us from participating in a system that we helped build and create and that we are working to perfect is not going to work.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to throw in a question to James. This is maybe, if you dare to be on social media lately, it's just been It's been probably worse than it's ever been. And, you know, there are people who I was talking to 2 weeks ago that I'm probably not going to ever talk to again. James, you are an expert. You're a professional in, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion. Like, is there anything you can give folks to have a conversation with a white person that just doesn't get it? I'm just going to be as straight up as I can be on that. Like, how can we even have a conversation without ending a relationship? Because that's happening all around us right now.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's one that's going to take longer than the 3 minutes I got. But I say, first of all, identify the purpose. Why are you having a conversation? Like, are you trying to convince somebody? Are you trying to share your ideas? Because if you're just trying to share your ideas and hear from them, that's the purpose of the conversation. If you're trying to change mind, heart, body, and soul in one conversation, it's not going to happen. What I would say is direct people, as Lisa does so well, to history. Because a lot of people who have the conversations don't know about the history of Black people in America or before America. They think Black people started here in 1619. And I think that there were never any Black people, no kings and queens in Africa or civilization. So if you start there at a deficit mindset, you're going to talk to me in a different kind of way than you should. So I think educating people on the foundation of what that is. And then the other piece of it, Stan, is realize that, you know, we're trying to have a conversation or dialogue to move towards action. I don't really care if we have time to talk anymore. I don't really care if we say we're going to have a conversation about race, unless we're going to change something in the system to make sure that people have equal access to economics, food, healthcare, wellness, and those kind of things. That's the key for me. So I think having that purpose in the conversation. And then something else you didn't ask, and once again, I'm gonna add it in because that's how I do. One of the things I think I want my Black people to be aware of, we got to get out of each other's way as well. Now, the people on this call, I've rocked with for a long time. Anika probably the shortest one because she's been, you know, I've met her later in life. But whether we disagree or agree on things, what we can't do as Black people is disparage others in our community and say that I'm not messing with them. They may have a different idea, but we got to be able to talk to them and work with them as well. That's something I've been blessed to have been able to do. When it comes down to getting some solutions done, it's not anybody I won't talk to or have a dialogue with or try to work together. If they're for our people, if they're not, that's a whole different story. But I think that's the key that we have to make sure. Because now we have an opportunity, but we can't, you know, have grudges or hold grudges from years ago and that kind of thing. So I think for us as well, we got to make sure that we continue to fight for solutions with each other, listens to each other, and also too realize that we may fail. I mean, I may try to do something to children's, and Lisa says to me, James, that wasn't the thing to do. It didn't work. Got it. Help me figure out what to do next. Or Nika or Ron. So I think that's the key for me. I'm excited for the first time in a long time in the 28 years I've lived here, actually 29 now, that we can change this and we're already there changing it as Black people. We got a lot of opportunity that we haven't had before, and we can do it in health, in economics, in politics. And I'm excited for that, but we have to not fight each other. We got to work together to make sure we get it done.
I'm very glad that you brought that up, and I should have brought it up too, because like, yeah, being through Minneapolis public schools and government, yeah, we struggle here working together. And yeah, well said, James. Thank you for sharing. We're gonna wrap this up, but I want to hear from everybody at least one more time. And you can share whatever you want to share in this space, what we've been dealing with the last week, what we've been dealing with for months. Where do we go from here? Or if there's any kind of parting words that you'd like to leave our listeners today. Let's start with Adrienne.
Stan, you didn't let me speak on, you know, the future, but I'm going to speak on it anyway. I am very, I'm very excited for where I think this country is going, and I'm going to tell you why. Joe Biden was instrumental in putting together the pandemic planning team that he and President Obama established and then was dismantled in 2018. What that tells me is that he gets it. He gets that we need someone mining the gate all the time related to the health and wellness of this country, but especially pandemics, because they're not going away. I'm excited because I am the mother of a Black daughter, and realizing that Kamala has her historical issues with mass incarceration, and she's not perfect. But you know what? It's Black girl magic all day long for me. I am so excited for a Black woman, because let's be clear, we all know that she will be making a lot more decisions than perhaps President Biden. One, because he's older, and two, she's smart. And she's not one to sit back and just take a back seat and have a pretty job. That's not what she does. And so I am very excited for that, but I'm more excited for what it's doing for our community. Black girls are now saying, oh, well, maybe I could be president, or maybe I could, run for office, or maybe I could be a doctor when, even though I live in poverty, I can still do something. And so I'm very excited to see what happens when the changes, they are taking names, they are not playing, they have been more engaged than I've ever seen them before. And that is very exciting, because they will hold this administration accountable for doing what they said they're going to do. We will hold them accountable, but we really need these young people to continue to step up and do what they're doing. And so I'm really excited for the future. I have a master's degree. I am working on a doctorate. My daughter is in college, and I'm a single parent. I don't know about anybody else, but if Joe Biden, I just have faith that he's going to come through with this plan to get rid of these student loans. I am really excited about that. I just have to be honest, because we all know that these student loans weigh our people down more than anything. And if you saw the amount of student loans I have now between me and my daughter, if he can get rid of those, I'm inviting him to the barbecue, because I need to get, even if he doesn't get rid of all of them. But I'm excited that he even realizes that that's an issue, because in the past, nobody addressed it. They were like, well, we'll just give you more time to pay it off. Okay, well, I've been paying them off for a while. I could use a little reprieve at this point. So I'm excited for that. Like I said, even if he's only able to give me a slight reprieve, I will take it. And I appreciate him addressing it and realizing that it's an issue. And that is something that is truly going to impact our community, because a lot of people will start going to school but stop because it's so expensive, and they don't want to be settled down in student loan debt. And so perhaps more of our Black and brown children will go to college now. They can afford to go to college if they are not settled down with student debt. So I'm excited for the future. I'm excited for COVID to go away, because I really need to travel more. That is my thing. And, I tell people all the time, anybody who knows me knows that I love to travel. That is how I deal with life. And the fact that I can't just hop on a plane and go somewhere is stressing me out ever so much, but I'm dealing with it, and I'm wearing my mask. I'm keeping my social distance. I'm pretty much living in my bubble. Me and my 3 kids, we are a bubble, and that's pretty much who I'm around. It's hard, it's difficult, but it's something that has to be done. And so as health professionals, we're not asking people to do things that we aren't doing ourselves. We don't get a pass just because we're in health. We have to do the same things you're doing. So for my people, I want you to know, I would never ask you to do something that I myself would not, or I'm not doing at this time. When we're giving you recommendations and guidance, know that it's coming from the heart, and that we just want to protect you and keep you safe, and make sure that you're here next year to help us rebel rouse and bring this country into a new place. And that's all I have for today.
That was beautiful. We're real close to wrapping, but I do want to hear all of your voices one more time as we finish this. Anika?
Well, I just want to say thank you for inviting me on this panel. It feels like a reunion with some really great folks. I wish we could have a barbecue, especially when COVID is over with. And I'm excited for, 2021. There's going to be a lot of election power going on, a lot of energy, especially at the Capitol, with some legislation that's going to be connected to, our liberation in so many different ways. And I'll just leave you with this. We always hear about the slogan, vote because our ancestors died, and we definitely should. But I always encourage people to run because our ancestors lived, right? And they are living through us, and we need to continue on with passing down the torch of justice, of equity, of freedom, of love, of humanity, and know that whenever we are on the front lines, we literally are fighting for everyone. Ida B. Wells, who's known for not only her anti-lynching letters, but she was a civil rights, voting rights activist as well. And she wasn't just an activist, or she wasn't only fighting for voting rights for women, she was one of the first pioneers for universal voting rights, right? And we need to get back to that when we are talking about all these different things, that we are using a universal lens, but we're also understanding that our humanity is what's going to lead us forward. So run, 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 run like Harriet, and hit up your girl. And also this Sunday, I will be on Dr. Sylvia Bartley's podcast for African American Leadership Forum. So you can catch that on her either Spotify or on, what is that? I think the iPodcast, and different venues there. But it'll be on KMOJ as well on Sunday.
Awesome, fantastic. Ron, you want to go next?
Great, yeah, and I'll be really brief. Number one, thank you, Stan. Thank you, Alf, for setting up these conversations and for the invitation today. Like Anika said, it does feel like a mini reunion. It is great to be in company with all of you all, and I always love contributing, but also I always love learning from all the contributions from everybody else. I'll just say this, these last couple of years have been tough for a whole lot of people. Certainly for those who have less means than we have, who have less access than we have. But what I've been sharing with people is that if you're listening to this message, you have officially survived every single year you've ever encountered, including 2020, right? What that tells me is that you have something to do, that your contributions are still needed, that your leadership and your perspectives and your stories and your experiences are needed. We talk a lot about the strength of our communities and the resilience of our communities, but we don't talk enough about the brilliance of our communities and the excitement of our communities and the opportunities for joy and optimism in our communities as well. And we need to spend more time leaning into that and working towards that and working for that. We're more than just survivors. We're more than just conquerors. We're also people who are regular folks doing regular stuff every day. We are leaders, right? We are brilliant. And I always want to encourage people to remember that side as well, that we're not always going to be in a spot of always fighting. The fact that we're seeing this level of opposition tells me that we've made progress. Because if we weren't making progress, they wouldn't be upset. If we weren't making progress, they wouldn't be afraid of the future. They would not be working to take their country back. They would not be taking every single tactic that they can, from modern day lynching to modern day mobs and domestic terrorism. That is in response to the progress that we've made. So we got to keep on going. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for the invitation. And I look forward to the work that we're going to be doing together moving forward.
Yeah, very, very powerful comments. Thank you, Ron. James?
I had to find the mute button. I think for me, I'll sum it up as, I'm Dr. Angela Davis. I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things I cannot accept. And I'm changing them quickly, and I'm changing them together with all of us. So thanks, Stan, for this. Thanks, Alf. Wonderful presentation.
Thank you. And I'm going to let Lissa wrap us.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Stan. Thank you, Elf. Thank you, panelists. I, in the spirit of Mary McLeod Bethune in the HBCUs that James brought up, bring you a word from her last will and testament. I leave you love, and I leave you confidence in one another. Mary McLeod Bethune knew that white supremacy threatened our relationships, that which is most valuable to us. That's what Anika reminded us about. So stay safe, beauties, and remember, we already know the way back.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'd like to thank all you guys for joining us. You guys have been fantastic, a blessing for this community. I also would like to thank African American Leadership Forum, Insight News, NorthPoint Health and Wellness, Children's Minnesota Spokesman-Recorder, and Minnesota Community Care. These are the folks, the organizations, the companies that are backing this. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, and we have no idea what will happen, but we're going to have smart Black people on here talking about whatever it is. And so we're going to sign off, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.